Hey guys, it is Christine. Welcome back. If you're new here, welcome. It is great to have you. Sorry, you're going to hear it's so hard to film in my living area. I have to because the kids are all sleeping and napping and the rooms are taken. But in the living area, we have TVs and iPads and computers and they all bling and beep and it's so hard to make sure all the sound's turned off. So I'm sorry if you hear stuff in the background. I did try. With that said, today I want to talk to you about how to get your baby to nap longer than 30 minutes or even 45 minutes, whatever it is, whatever the time frame it is that your baby is cat napping for. I want to help you fix it because it can be really frustrating. So I have had, if you're new here, I have 3 children. They're currently 4.5, 2, almost 3, and I have a 10, she'll be 11 months in 9 days time. So a little baby, a toddler, and a preschool age child. And all 3 of them at one point or another had short naps when they were babies. My eldest was by far the worst. He was a cat napper for the first 9 months of his life. Nearly drove me insane. My middle child was probably the best out of all 3. She just slept really, really well. And then my youngest was a mix of the two. She's a really good sleeper. She's been sleeping through the night from a young age, but she's definitely had her fair share of short naps. And so I feel like I have a good enough amount of experience to share what has helped and what to look out for and things like that. First of all, let's focus on the causes, the most common causes of short naps. Wind. Babies often have trapped wind, especially newborns, while their digestive system is still working all the kinks out and trying to figure out how to do this job of digesting food and all that. I found that typically if my babies woke up really soon after I put them down, it was often wind, and just especially if they're tightly swaddled, I found that just picking them up and putting them on my shoulder and giving them a couple pats would bring a burp right up. Sometimes all I had to do was pick them up. So just be aware of that and work on really good burping techniques with your babies. I'm trying to think of the ones I like the best. I love to put baby on their tummy over my knees and just rub their back. And I'd do that for a little while and then I'd lift them up and put them over my shoulder, and almost all the time I got burps out that way. So that was really helpful. Too much awake time is probably the leading cause of short naps in babies. Parents often just don't know that babies cannot be up for extended periods of time. I have put in the blog post that goes with this video appropriate amounts of wake time for your baby. Also, I'm sorry, there's so much traffic in the background, it's distracting me. But if you want to see that, go ahead and check it out. I have it linked in the description below. A good rule of thumb is that your newborn should not be up for longer than an hour at a time. Obviously, you can't control it all the time. Sometimes babies just don't go back to sleep. But for the most part, if you can try and keep it to under an hour, including their feeding time, it will help them nap a lot better because they won't be overtired. Not enough wake time can also be a cause of short naps, especially in older babies, in which case you need to just keep them up a little bit longer and make sure that they're actually tired out. Lack of stimulation or overstimulating. With newborns, you don't want too much stimulation, people in their face. If you've ever taken your newborn into a crowded room and everyone's looking at them and then they freak out, that is a classic case of overstimulation. They're just it's too much for them to process, and then they'll really struggle to wind down and go to sleep. So trying to keep things calm around them, not too many flashing lights and noise and all that kind of stuff, which can be really challenging when there are older siblings, but it can be managed. Another common cause of short naps is reflux, and 2 out of 3 of my babies have had mild reflux, and it definitely impacted their naps. At the beginning, once I got them onto some medication and got it sorted, that helped a lot. But if you find that your baby just is not napping well on their back at all and is screaming, even if they're not necessarily spitting up, it's probably a good idea just to at least get them checked out and make sure that reflux isn't the issue. Look it up, do some research, and you can make a decision based on that. And the last thing to be aware of is that sometimes it's just biologically normal for babies to take short naps and they will grow out of it. So you can do all the right things in the world and they will still take a short nap. That's what happened with my firstborn, and as difficult as it was to accept because it was just hard having the day broken up into so many short naps, he did grow out of it. He's a brilliant sleeper now at 4.5. He was a brilliant sleeper by his first birthday. So he slept well overnight. It's just that his naps took time to consolidate and become longer. So just be aware that you're not necessarily doing something wrong, but in saying that, let's talk about tips on how you can try to extend your baby's naps. First of all, have a consistent schedule. If you can get your baby into a fairly consistent rhythm throughout the day, their body clock will adjust to that and they will naturally become tired at similar times during the day, from day to day, you know. And so naturally their body will just be ready to nap, and that will help them to nap for longer periods instead of trying to put them down when they're not necessarily tired or overtired and things like that. So having a consistent schedule can definitely help. Another thing that can really help is having a pre-nap routine. It doesn't have to be like elaborate or fancy or anything, just short and sweet to the point. For me, it was just a case of like holding baby while I went and like shut the curtains and then turn on the white noise and put them down. That's all it took, but it's enough for them to know that sleep time is coming and to help them get their bodies ready for sleep. Next, you need to work on having the correct wake time. This can be really difficult because it can be like an ever-moving target, but there are definitely sleep averages and wake time averages for babies, and so if you at least, like if you're having trouble, you can at least go and use that as a comparison and see, oh, okay, like we're way off, like we need to change things a little bit, and so fix, like I think if you're struggling, why not try, you know? How's it going to hurt anything? So give that a go. Like I said, I've got the wake times listed on my blog, which is linked below. Okay, this one is probably the most important, aside from having a consistent schedule, is independent sleep skills. And this can be controversial for some people because they don't believe that babies should be allowed to cry for any length of time. My personal opinion is that there is no harm that comes from it, especially if their needs are met and you're there. You're not like neglecting them, you're still checking up on them. And so if your baby is not able to go down to sleep on their own without you assisting them, then it is very common for babies to then wake up partway through a sleep cycle because they don't know, like when they go from one sleep cycle to the next, they kind of wake up a little bit. And if your baby's waking up and isn't able to put themselves back to sleep, then of course they're just going to wake up and they don't know how to get back to sleep without you rocking them or whatever it is that you do to help them sleep. So if you can work on establishing independent sleep skills for your baby, and it'll really help. And I started doing this from a very young age, like basically day one. That doesn't mean that I left them there to like scream their little lungs out all day long. By having a consistent schedule, a good feeding routine, and just making sure that they were like burped and swaddled and things like that, usually they would just go off to sleep, especially my second two. The first is kind of like a guinea pig. I feel like your first child, and you try things and just like, okay, well that didn't work, we'll try something else next time. And we did with his sisters, and they've been brilliant sleepers, and we haven't had to like leave them to cry for extended periods or anything like that. So a little bit of fussing is not going to hurt your baby at all, and it's amazing for them because they are gaining the skill of sleeping, so of teaching themselves to sleep anyway. They know how to sleep, but getting themselves off to sleep without assistance is definitely a skill. And finally is to focus on having the right environment. Babies, newborns can sleep really well in loud rooms with people walking around and everything during the day. That's normal, but it gets to a point where they're too distracted to do that, and so they need their own space that is away from the busyness of the household. I tend to use like curtains to make the room darkened, but I don't make it pitch black because I do like my kids to be able to like sleep just wherever, and I don't want them to only be able to sleep in the pitch black. So I do have a darkened room. Use white noise, that is brilliant. Swaddle if your baby's really little and still has a startle reflex, that'll definitely help. And just making sure the temperature is correct and things like that. So think about creating a conducive sleep environment. I've got more stuff listed on the blog, so you can check it out there. Those things will all help your baby to sleep longer during the day, except if they are just wired to wake up early. And some babies are like that, and they wake up and they're happy and they can just go. Other babies, especially if your baby's really grumpy, they probably do need to extend the nap. When my babies are super little, I try and like rock them to get them to like extend that nap or wear them in a carrier or something like that. But as they get older, we do focus more on independent sleep skills. So that's just something to be aware of. The other thing is you're going to find that there are just some common sleep disruptions that are normal. You can't do anything about it. You just have to go with the flow. One can be milestones when your baby's learning to roll or crawl or walk. Any of those can have a big impact on sleep. I usually find it's only like a few days and then they get over, you know, the novelty of wanting to practice new skills. But it is just something to be aware of. Teething is another obvious one. So I like to use ibuprofen once my babies, I think it's past 6 months, babies can have ibuprofen, and I like to use that. I find it better than Tylenol. And then Wonder Weeks is another thing. If you don't know about the Wonder Weeks, then you can look it up. I do have a post on my blog about them. But basically, I like to think of them as like the mental milestones. You have like physical milestones like rolling and everything, but Wonder Weeks are like the what's happening in the background in order for all those physical things to take place. So they can definitely cause disruptions. And then sickness is another obvious one, and you just kind of have to push through it. So just have some grace and flexibility in those cases, and you're doing a great job. If your baby's taking cat naps, you're not doing anything wrong. It's just very normal for babies, but there are things you can do to try and help them extend their sleep. And especially if you're a first-time mama, it is so overwhelming. There is so much information. There are so many opinions. Just take what works for you, feel no guilt, and just do your best, which I know you're already doing. So I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I will see you next time. Bye.